What if the president could take control of your city overnight? On August 11th, President Donald Trump did exactly that in Washington, D.C. With a single announcement, he placed the entire Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal command and ordered 800 National Guard troops onto city streets. Trump promised that crime, barbarism, filth, and human garbage will disappear, vowing to liberate the capital in the name of law and order. Yet, here is the twist. Violent crime in D.C. was not spiraling out of control. In fact, federal statistics reveal violent crime dropped by more than a third last year, reaching its lowest point in 30 years. Even the D.C. mayor, Muriel Bowser, described Trump's federal takeover as unsettling and unprecedented, but admitted the city had little legal power to resist. For the next 30 days, the president commands every city officer, every patrol car, every arrest. And he has warned cities like New York and Los Angeles, you could be next. If unchecked, this sweeping assertion of federal power threatens the very core of self-government and could happen in any American city, maybe even yours. How did we reach the point where a U.S. president can commandeer an entire police force? What does this mean for democracy, local control, and the future of American cities? Let's set the stage. What events and political pressures led up to this extraordinary federal intervention? Imagine waking up to find that your city's leaders have been sidelined, and the president is calling the shots on your streets. That is not some distant scenario. It is happening right now in Washington, D.C., and what unfolds could decide the fate of local democracy across America. D.C. is not just another city. It is a federal district, born from the Constitution and governed by a unique set of rules. Since the 1970s, locals have elected their own mayor and city council, but Congress still reserves the right to overrule them or even take direct control. This fragile balance, outlined in the Home Rule Act, means your right to self-governance can be revoked at any moment. Hidden inside the Home Rule Act is a rarely used provision, Section 740, that lets the president seize control of D.C.'s police in a public safety emergency. This power is supposed to last just 30 days, but its very existence makes D.C. more vulnerable than any other American city. Local leaders, including Mayor Muriel Bowser, call this arrangement unsettling and unprecedented, yet they have little real power to stop a federal takeover. Now, President Trump has activated that authority, taking command of D.C.'s police force and deploying at least 800 National Guard troops throughout the capital. He claims the city is overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, vowing to liberate D.C. and warning that other cities could face the same intervention if they do not self-clean up. If this playbook succeeds here, it could be replicated in your community. But are these emergency powers justified? In 2023, D.C. had the third highest gun homicide rate among large U.S. cities, with up to 274 firearm deaths, a heartbreaking surge, and the worst in 20 years. The toll is real, and lives have been lost. Yet the story shifted. In 2024, violent crime dropped by 35%, the largest annual decrease in recent memory. In the first 7 months of 2025, violent crime fell another 26%. Mayor Bowser notes that last year's violent crime rate was the lowest in 30 years. Statistically, D.C. is now much safer than it was just 2 years ago. So why is the president intervening now as the numbers improve? If we misunderstand D.C.'s legal status, we risk watching local self-rule get swept aside, not just here, but anywhere federal power chooses to step in. What happens in D.C. could set the precedent for your city, your rights, and your future. To grasp what is truly at stake, we need to break down how D.C.'s legal structure makes this intervention possible. Let us examine the power dynamics shaping the capital and what they could mean for the rest of the country. Trump calls it a liberation. Critics call it a power grab. But here's the kicker. The future of who controls your streets and your rights might hang in the balance. On August 11th, President Trump stunned the country by seizing direct federal command of Washington, D.C.'s police and deploying 800 National Guard troops into the heart of the capital. He did not mince words, claiming D.C. was plagued by what he called crime, barbarism, filth, and human garbage, and promising to wipe out sanctuary policies to liberate the city. But here is the jaw-dropper. The numbers tell a totally different story. Federal data shows violent crime in D.C. actually dropped by 35% last year and fell another 26% in the first 7 months of this year. Major news outlets, including Reuters, the Irish Times, and the New York Times, have all confirmed that violence in the capital is now at its lowest point in 30 years. Despite those facts, Trump insisted his crackdown was essential, setting a precedent that could ripple far beyond D.C. He issued a blunt threat. If cities like New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago do not clean up, they could be next. This was not just a policy move, it was a nationwide warning shot, and the message was unmistakable. This is where the stakes get real, fast. Local officials, including D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, called the federal takeover unsettling and unprecedented. Yet by law, they were nearly powerless to push back. For 30 days, the democratic voice of D.C. residents was effectively silenced, replaced by direct White House command. Analysts warn this was about more than just crime statistics. It was political theater on the grandest stage. Every detail, the timing, the rhetoric, the spectacle, serves Trump's campaign narrative about law and order. Which leads to the real question, is this truly about public safety, or is it a blueprint for future federal crackdowns wherever dissent arises? The danger could not be clearer. If presidential orders can override both facts and local autonomy, no city in America is safe from similar intervention. What happens when data is ignored and policing becomes a tool of political power, not public need? If this sets a new precedent, the autonomy of American cities and the rights of millions of residents could be at risk for good. But how did this unprecedented move unfold behind the scenes? Let's rewind and break down what really happened, step by step. Imagine waking up to find federal agents patrolling your streets, your city's fate decided from afar. This isn't a distant scenario. It's a real playbook now being tested in the nation's capital. If it succeeds, your community could be next, and the stakes are nothing less than who controls your neighborhood and your rights to shape its future. President Trump's direct takeover of Washington, D.C.'s police and deployment of the National Guard isn't just about one city's safety. It's a clear warning to mayors and citizens everywhere. Comply with federal demands or risk losing local control. In his own words, cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago were put on notice. Clean up crime or face the same intervention. But here's the twist. This intervention is happening even as violent crime in D.C. dropped by more than 1/3 last year and continues to fall. The president still insisted that the city was totally out of control, ignoring the data and local objections. What does it mean when federal power is exercised not in response to crisis, but in defiance of local reality? Critics warn we're sliding toward a future where presidents can override local governments whenever they choose. If public safety can justify seizing a city's police, what's to stop a future administration from cracking down on protests, labor actions, or opposition groups? As the Washington Post put it, today it's about crime, but tomorrow it could be about dissent. Local leaders and grassroots organizations see the long-term consequences. D.C.'s mayor called the move unsettling and unprecedented, while activists warn it could destroy public trust, silence citizens, and undermine local problem-solving. When the federal government sidelines local voices, it risks chilling debate and discouraging everyday people from participating in their own communities. If this becomes the new normal, no city is safe from federal overreach, no matter who sits in the Oval Office. The historic balance between local self-rule and federal authority is suddenly up for grabs. What happens to democracy when community decisions can be erased by a single executive order? The precedent set today could redraw the boundaries of presidential power, strip cities of independence, and endanger the right to protest or guide your own community's future. Our democracy rests on trust and agreed-upon limits. Lose those, and the relationship between federal and local power turns into a fight, not a partnership. But how did we get here? And why now? To understand the roots of this showdown, we need to look at the history and the politics shaping these decisions. You are not powerless. Cities and citizens can push back. When presidents deploy federal power over local law enforcement, it does not mean the public has no say. History shows that communities, city leaders, and courts all have tools to safeguard civic autonomy, and it starts with knowing your rights. First, let us look at the law. Under the Home Rule Act, Washington, D.C. elects its own leaders, but Congress and the president retain ultimate authority. President Trump cited Section 740 to justify his 30-day takeover, but legal experts stress this power is not unlimited. As one Washington Post opinion noted, presidential emergency powers face checks from Congress, the courts, and the public itself. Second, local activism matters. Throughout American history, public outrage has forced leaders to reconsider federal crackdowns. In cities like Portland and New York, mass protests, legal challenges, and relentless media scrutiny have reversed or limited federal policing actions. The courts have at times halted or narrowed federal interventions when they overstep, defending the rights of local governments and their residents. Third, transparency and public scrutiny are vital. When communities demand clear explanations and evidence for emergency actions, presidents are pressured to justify their decisions. City officials, advocacy groups, and everyday people have successfully used lawsuits, open records requests, and organized rallies to spotlight overreach and protect local control. If we ignore these lessons, we risk a future where local voices are routinely silenced by distant powers. Federal overreach today could become federal routine tomorrow, eroding the foundation of self-government that keeps American cities unique and responsive. So, what can you do? Stay informed about your city's legal rights. Support local leaders who defend civic autonomy. Speak out through protests, petitions, or at public meetings when you see democracy sidelined. History proves that when citizens unite, even sweeping executive orders can be challenged and changed. These lessons matter far beyond Washington, D.C. Next, we'll explore why this turning point could reshape the future of local democracy and what it means for every American city. The fate of local democracy may hinge on what happens next. Yes, the president can take over your city, but only if key checks and voices are ignored. President Trump's 30-day federal takeover of Washington's police department, backed by 800 National Guard troops, is not just a response to crime statistics, it's a flex of executive power. This move comes despite the Capitol recording its lowest violent crime rate in 3 decades, and a steep drop of over 1/4 just this year, according to federal data. D.C.'s mayor has called the intervention unsettling and unprecedented, yet she admits there is little choice but to comply as the law stands. The Home Rule Act gives Congress, and by extension the president, final authority over D.C., but it was never intended as a blank check for political crackdowns. Trump's own language, warning other cities to clean up or face similar action, signals this could become a playbook for wider interventions if left unchecked. The real risk? If citizens and local leaders stay silent, today's one-off can quickly turn into tomorrow's norm. Each time executive power expands without robust debate, the promise of self-governance shrinks. We risk normalizing federal crackdowns, blurring the line between public safety and political control, and losing freedoms Americans have long taken for granted. Staying informed and vocal is now more important than ever. Whether this stands as an isolated episode or sparks a new era of federal policing depends on what all of us do next. In the days ahead, What happens on DC's streets will shape both the legacy of this intervention and the future of American democracy. We'll be tracking the fallout and the voices rising in response.